The Bookshelf with Ryan Tubridy is brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. Eason have a rich heritage of bookselling since 1886. In fact, it's probably where you got your first ever book, or maybe your last one, and hopefully your next one after you listen to this episode of our podcast. And stay listening for our Ryan Recommends slot, my weekly recommendation, where I'll discuss a book I've read recently that I think you'll really enjoy too. All the books we discuss on this episode of our podcast are available now in your local Eason store, or indeed order online from easons.com before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch with free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired. Welcome once again to The Bookshelf with me, Ryan Tubridy. Today we're joined by a special guest and we'll be exploring her life story through 3 significant books from her personal collection. Not just any books, as per usual. We'll be delving into her favourite childhood book, also the book that made her cry, and the book that changed her life. My guest today, well, here she is. She's a renowned Irish TV presenter. She's a podcaster, an author, an actress, best known possibly for hosting Love Island and her work with MTV Europe. She has captivated audiences with her charisma and versatility, both of which she has an abundance of. Most recently, she has joined the cast of 222, a ghost story, which is enjoying a wonderful run at Dublin's 3 Olympia Theatre until August the 11th, 2024. Laura Whitmore, welcome aboard.
What an intro. Thanks, Ryan.
No,
That's
well,
lovely.
you're most welcome. It's versatile is a great word for you because Love Island, true crime podcast with your husband, Ian Sterling, and then treading the boards in the Olympia. What an interesting mix of things.
She doesn't know what she is.
What are you?
I don't know. I'm just faking it till I make it.
No, but if you met somebody in France and they said, oh, hello, what do you do for a living? What do you say?
It's interesting. I guess it depends at the time. I always like to think...
No, you're in a lift. They don't have that much time.
Okay. I normally start off a broadcaster, but storyteller. I love stories.
Yeah.
Like, I love stories. So whether I'm playing a character and telling a story that way, or whether I'm interviewing someone and getting a story out of them, whether I'm, dumping someone off an island or you're interviewing a musician, it's all stories, you know? Yeah,
I do.
And it's not like people say, God, you've such a range in your career. I'm like I'm not saving lives, I'm not in hospitals doing like real work. I'm just telling stories.
Not important, but it is interesting.
It's interesting and it's fun and I'm grateful. And I'm lucky.
We'll talk about gratitude and luck in a minute, but where did the curiosity come from then, do you think? And the interest in stories. I love that you've alighted on that, stories and storytelling.
Yeah. I think being Irish, first of all.
No question.
All of us just love a story.
Yeah.
And I think as well, like I grew up with just like my parents aren't together and I'm close to my father, but I grew up with just my mum and Bray. And I used to call myself a lonely child. I thought an only child was a lonely child.
Yeah.
And then my mother corrected me. No, only. I'm like, okay. And then I got 2 brothers that came around like 10 years later.
Yes.
But
stay with the early version. Were you both?
What, lonely and only? Yeah. So I used to have little stories. I used to have a fake radio show on like a karaoke machine on a cassette tape, talking to myself. Like.
Tell me about it. I want to hear more.
No one will ever hear that. And,
How did it work in practice?
Because I remember getting a karaoke machine from Santa Claus, and then I did use it for the singing. But then I was like, this is quite handy, so I used it to create radio shows.
Great.
And like interview my teddies and have them on. And I also sang the songs as well.
Now, how do you... Now, I've interviewed some interesting creatures in my time, but how did you interview the Ted? Like,
they didn't give me much back, I'm not going to lie.
What great practice for Love Island.
I know, it's great.
No, I shouldn't say that.
No, they're lovely.
Tell me, what sort of questions do you ask the teddies? I mean, was it just like, how was your day? Or do you miss your cub? Or how does it work?
I know, there was numerous. I had some Care Bears and they were, each of them were different. I had the Irish one with the shamrock on it and like the one with the rainbow on it. So yeah, they all had different stories, no matter what teddy you are.
Did you watch shows when you were younger that had interviews going on in them? And I don't mean necessarily chat shows, but were you interested in that sort of thing? Because that's quite grown up to be that young, doing talk show interviewing.
You say grown up, I was talking to teddies, Ryan.
I did the toy show.
Same thing. Do you know what I loved? Like growing up, I remember on Saturday mornings with CD UK. I love music as well. So it was Ant Deck and Cat Deely.
Yeah.
And I loved that, and I loved, they used to do lots of sketches and stuff. And remember they used to do chums and they used to kind of dress up and it was silly, but it was fun. And then they had their musicians on and I've always loved music and I've always found that fascinating too. So I just remember watching that, but then it was also, I didn't really see I know I love Davina as well. Kind of grew up watching her.
Davina McCall,
But I didn't really. I kind of wanted to do that, but I didn't. Like no one in my family did that. Like my mother is a civil servant for the Department of Environment. My dad worked in finance. Like it's not really
there were no clues
an
there.
obvious route. No, so I was just up in my room, like living in my own little world, creating my own little stories.
Only child, but obviously extrovert, or at least.
You say that when I was in junior infants, you'll be shocked by this. The teacher took my mom in and said that, look, Laura's not really talking in class. She's quite quiet. Shocker. So my mother sent me to drama classes, and that's when it all changed.
Really?
She said I came home with a hand on my hip, this attitude, this lovely drama teacher called Iris Keogh, who I ended up being with for like 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
And I kind of found my people.
Yes.
And I did little plays, and my older cousins, I didn't have sisters, but I had these 2 older cousins. And then we used God, I'm not really selling myself well, but we used to steal my uncle's video recorder and make like ads. Like the Daz ad and stuff.
Great.
So we'd get my uncle's shirt and put some ketchup on it. It'd be like, we actually did that. We got in trouble. It was like, oh, and she'd knock on the door and we'd film all these little stories. Do you know that? Oh no, like was it Shane Ritchie used to do back in the day?
Yeah.
So we used to just always play and do all. So I kind of grew up watching them, watching these things on television, which I couldn't do. So I would do it in my way.
You're talking about the ad, just to go back a step, where they knock on the door and go, hello, Mrs. Murphy, do you use Daz?
Well, what are the chances?
I can't believe it. How did you knock on my door? And you were doing that.
Yeah, I was doing that with my cousin Claire. Give her a shout out. She was 6 years older than me, so she was probably 13. I was like a bit younger.
Yeah, your excuse is rock solid. She, on the other hand,
I know.
has questions.
We still have those videos. I'm sure we'll get them out at some point, but you know.
Let's talk books for a moment, Laura Whitmore, because you described as being an only child. On occasionally a lonely child. I love that. I think we all made that mistake years ago. Tell me about books in your house and your mum. Was she a reader or your
Mom's a reader. She devours books.
Tell me everything in terms of the presence of them. And
I just would see bookshelves, and if we would go away on holidays, she'd like just pack in the suitcase would be like 10 books. And toilet roll, because I don't think she thought Spain sold toilet roll. Did anyone else's parents do this? Like when we used to go on holidays, we'd pack like tea bags, toilet roll, like all these basic things.
Why did she bother leaving?
No,
just stay home, read, and go to the toilet.
I was like, can we pack some clothes in these bags? But she's always packed stuff because the toilet roll over there won't be as nice as the Irish toilet paper.
Okay, well, she's a woman of taste.
But
so many books in the case.
Yeah, so she's a great reader and still is a great reader.
Great.
She'll kill me now. But she's like, have you heard of audiobooks? They're great.
But they are great. She's right.
She's only got into that in the last year.
Yeah.
So she's like going through so many at the moment.
Burning through them. And what? So you had bookshelves at home.
Yeah, we had bookshelves.
And that's the start.
Yeah.
You know, for any young parents or for any kids who grew up in a house with books around them. That's the game changer, because suddenly you find yourself looking at the spines and you see the art of it, and then you pick one out and go, maybe I'll have a look at the, it's there.
And just feeling them and the covers. And they always say, don't judge a book by its cover. But I love a cover.
Oh, I do. I judge them all the time. I couldn't agree with you more.
If I see a beautiful cover, I just want it, just to see it and look at it. And
an ugly, a terrible cover, I'm gone.
No, I don't want to be seen holding that.
Also, sorry, I'll come back to one side, but when they put the cover featuring the Netflix series or the film version of it on the cover, I'm gone as well.
I don't like that.
Anyway, you were saying.
I don't like that. It might as well be reading the film.
No.
And then I remember like going to Bray Library. There's a little library which is still there. And so every week I'd get 3 books from the library. A library card.
With the visits to the library then. So you were a fairly voracious reader in the sense.
You don't know what I was reading. Like I was reading like a little bit of Sweet Valley High at that point, and Enid Blyton and The Faraway Tree, and
that's all important stuff. Yeah. And most guests of your vintage that come in here will talk about Enid Blyton and talk about the books you've mentioned. There is no snobbery in this room. There is no judgment in this room.
Yeah.
This is a room for people who just want to talk. It is. But if people want to read graphic novels or comics or magazines. It doesn't matter. Reading's reading. So this
story.
is... It's story. Exactly. Back to the first thing you said to me when you came in the store. So let's talk about the first book that you pick from your shelf. And we're going to talk about the book from childhood. Let's go back to what age were you? Where did you get this book? Can you remember much detail
I do,
about
because
it?
I still have. And it's it's kind of a really obvious one in one way. But for me to be be true and authentic, I have to pick this book because it was literally the book of my childhood.
Okay.
And I've read it like 100 times. And I got as a present, I used to get those like hardback books like in a set.
Yeah, I love
so
it.
I had like a Roald Dahl collection.
Oh, my favourite. Okay.
I had like a Beatrix Potter one when I was younger.
Yeah.
So, read all of them. And that's lovely because I've now, my mom's, like I still have that from like 30 odd years ago. And now I can give that to my child. It's a lovely thing
what
to
a
have.
Beautiful thing, yeah.
And we've got the Roald Dahl ones and I'm picking Matilda, which is, it's just a brilliant book. And I could probably read it now and still, I find things in there. And I think maybe as a little girl by herself in her room reading this book, there were things that, thankfully, I had a nicer family set up.
Yeah, that's
Slightly,
reassuring. Yeah,
Slightly.
Yeah.
No, I did. But, and it just made me love the idea of reading and escapism through reading. And there's I can't remember exactly, I'll paraphrase, but in the book it says something about Matilda, how she went to Africa with Rudyard Kipling and, she went to India with Rudyard Kipling and went to Africa with Ernest Hemingway and how she travelled the world but never actually left her room ever.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of that. So I'm still in my room in Bray just reading about all these places.
Yes.
And
the portals. You were going through the portals, yeah.
And I loved it. And there's a resilience there as well with Matilda.
Yes.
Like, she's a badass character.
She kind of ahead of her time before people were writing these kind of characters. When you think of a Roald Dahl, who people will have questions about, but let's just...
I think it's hard as well because nothing ages well.
Yeah, well, I'm a testament to that. But ultimately, this is a story that has not only resonated, but it's become this amazing film.
And the musicals.
Twice a film and the musical.
Well, I remember the film for me, the original one with Danny DeVito as Mr. Wormwood. Is just and Pam Ferris as Miss Trunchbull was classic. Because you have in your head, I love when you read the book first. So I had the visual in my head of what Matilda looked like.
Essentially, you're making your own film.
But I was happy with that.
Yeah, good.
I was happy with that one. And it's wonderful. And do you know what I love as well? It's the pictures as well. Like, so you look at Quentin
Blake's illustrations are so... They're so... I actually have looked at them more recently and see how simple they are. But of course, they're not simple at all. But they're just so...
They're so unique to... I actually bought at an auction an original drawing of Matilda.
I love that you did that.
Yeah, it's in my bathroom. I can see it every time I sit in the loo.
Oh, what a beautiful picture to look at when you're on the loo. Sorry, that sentence came out all wrong. But you know what I mean?
Yeah. I see it more than anything else.
Is it colour or...?
Yeah, it's colour. It's a sketch.
That's one of the most amazing things you've ever bought, by the way.
Sometimes I go to these auctions or like I'm hosting these like events, like charity events, and then I have a few drinks and I just decide to bid on things.
And you did on that.
And I bid on that. And I'm so happy I did.
Zero regrets. I can tell looking at you, like no regrets.
It's really cool because I know what that book means to me. But particularly that with Quentin Blake. And I met him. I was working on this morning and he was in there like still drawn away. And I think I was just as excited as if I would have met like the writer of the book at that time if he was still alive. Yeah.
I love that you were so into that. Like if you were doing This Morning, and he was a guest, for you from like suddenly this little girl from on her own in the room in Bray, reading this book without
that's
any.
the guy who drew that. That picture that's in my head still to this day. Like that's that visual in my head of that little girl because I think I thought I was Matilda.
Why not though? That's what they're there for. These books are there with heroes
without the magical powers.
Of course, not that we know of.
Yeah.
And then you met Quentin Blake and you have the picture in your bathroom.
Yeah.
This all goes full circle. I love that choice. Okay, that's the book from your childhood. Well done, Laura.
You got to come over to my house for a little week or whatever.
I'll be back in a minute. I just need to use the loo. Okay, let's look at your second book. We're going to talk about the book that made you cry. And before we get to your choice of book, I always like to try and establish the cry factor with the guest in terms of how emotional are you and how emotionally attached are you to art, whether it's a movie or a painting or a song or a book. I mean, are you a crier is really what I'm asking.
Yeah, I feel like my emotions are very close to the surface.
Are they?
Yeah, particularly I feel like as I'm getting older even more, so maybe becoming a mother as well, I find it really, sometimes things come up online I find really hard to look at without becoming emotionally attached. I remember my degree is in journalism. Mm-hmm. I studied drama and then I did a degree in journalism because I needed a real job.
Yeah.
That's what my dad said. Get a real job. I was like, look at me now, Dad. I don't have a real job. So I studied journalism and I remember working in a newsroom and news talk. And like, I don't think I was cut out for it because I couldn't cope with bad news every day. Right. And news is bad news. Sadly.
Sadly, yeah.
And you'd be in the newsroom and there'd be a really bad accident on the M50. Like I was like an intern, so I was like the bottom of the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, can you get anyone, any eyewitnesses or any family member who lost, trying to ring up? And I'm like, what? I can't do this.
Yeah.
I could become too invested, and then you need to move on to a new story the next day. And I'd be still thinking about what happened to that woman the day before.
Okay.
And a lot of my friends have gone on and done brilliant things, and they've worked in war zones, and I just don't think I can do that.
Yes.
Because I just get too upset.
And watching movies and things like that? Or?
I cry at John Lewis ads. The Christmas
so
one.
I know that waiting for the song
It's
going.
so sad.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I find it really hard.
Okay.
So, but I think that's also, it's quite fun to have those. I think maybe that helps me with some of the acting stuff because they're there ready to be used if needed.
You can break out the tears.
if needed, if they're there, if they feel real.
Okay.
Yeah.
Books is a different proposition, and books are problematic in that sometimes I don't think I've ever seen somebody looking at a book with tears falling down their face.
Oh, you've never watched it?
Weirdly, I've never watched it.
You've watched me read.
Is she going to cry yet?
It's so interesting. Watching someone else read a book.
Yeah. But you like to, what do you like to read now that we're out of childhood and into adulthood? What do you like to pick up, generally speaking?
I think a lot of it is timing. Like sometimes stuff that's going on in your own life can be quite triggering with what you're reading and you find things in. The book that I've chosen next, I read in 2008. And I remember that because I was, I think, auditioning for the MTV gig and I was back and forth to London and I had the book with me. And I remember, because I used to read it, when you love a book.
I do.
And you're not just reading it at night time, you're reading it when you've got 5 minutes. You're reading it 5 minutes on the bus. You're reading it waiting to get on a plane.
I love that feeling. It's
Hop to the loo.
It's like being in love.
It is, though. And then you're getting closer to the end and you're like, oh no, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to start again. I'm not going to feel the same way about a book again. And this 1,000 Splendid Suns was the book I was reading when I was back and forth. And I mean, it's set in Afghanistan. It's not a life or
so many questions. Now, it's 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khalid Hosseini.
Yeah.
Let's get the story. Give us the blurb of the story, and then we need to get to why, what, where, when.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is about what?
So...
You say Afghanistan.
So the backdrop of Afghanistan, the Taliban, it's central to, I guess, women. So Mariam is the lead character, and it kind of spans over 45 years.
Yes.
Mariam is born, she's a legitimate child, so you can imagine not great for women, particularly. Her dad doesn't want anything to do with her. Her mother never really got over the heartbreak.
Yes.
And not to give too much away, but it's kind of tragedy after tragedy.
Yes.
And if you when I'm telling this story, I'm not going to make it like a book you'll want to read, but it's the resilience of this woman over time. Like she loses her mother, she gets married off to this man 30 years older than her. Basically, he wants to have a child. She just, it doesn't work for her with children. And that's what women are only good for in that situation, in that climate. And then he ends up marrying, because you can in that particular culture, marry another woman. So there's another woman in the house who's younger, Layla. And these women they're both wives of this older man who's quite abusive. And they don't, they both have these circumstances that they don't particularly want to be in. And life is pretty shit.
Yeah.
But it's kind of this bond. It almost becomes like a mother-daughter bond in a way. And then, throughout all of this,
they see something in each other.
They see something in each other.
They're almost minding each other against this tyrant.
Yeah. But then also they kind of hate each other at one point because Mariam is jealous in a way.
Yeah, because they're rivals.
Because they're rivals of the same man who they don't like.
Oh, yeah. Wow, how screwed up.
Yeah, how screwed up. Yeah. And what's, I guess, really sad through all of this is okay, yes, this is it's a fictional book, but it's kind of real life too. And for me, as I was reading it, it almost became, I almost related to these women, even though, because I'm really privileged that I was just born in Ireland at a time where I've got rights, but I could be born in another country now.
Tell me about what you were relating to, because it's so alien to you. This is Afghanistan. It's bigamy, it's cruelty, and it's tyranny and what have you, and it's oppression. What part of you is going, I understand that?
It feels mad to say this, but just the emotions of being within... And I'm very lucky to have a lovely life. But,
that's okay.
Just as a woman, even the rivalry between women put up against each other. And when there's a turn in the book is when they help each other and they realise they're on the same side. But women sometimes can be pitted against each other.
Now, this is where I can't understand it because I'm not a woman. And
What? What a way to find out.
I'm leaving this podcast. I heard something different. I'm not a woman. You're talking about a simpatico or an understanding of characters that I will never understand. And I think that's obviously what it is here, is that you just saw these two women being extraordinary.
Yeah, and it took them time to find that strength to help each other, because they are pitted against each other and treated as second-class citizens. And it's also, when I'm reading this, I'm like, this isn't a book from like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. You know, this could be written now because of things that are happening at the moment. But it was kind of when these two women found their voice, even though they didn't have much of a voice within the household, but even just conversations, communication. I think sometimes if you're not getting on with someone, if you just have a conversation with them and you realize you're both on the same wavelength, they both were experiencing the same thing.
Just talk.
Yeah.
It's remarkable,
isn't it?
And we don't do enough of it in Ireland. We
talk about everything except
we talk
the
a lot,
thing.
but we say nothing.
We say nothing.
You know, we're devils.
Yeah.
But they talk.
It takes, and there's so much more. Like, there's, Layla's in love with someone else, and then she gets pregnant, and that's why she has to marry off. Because she had opportunity. Then she ended up getting pregnant out of wedlock. So then they married her off to this older man who was married to marry him, and she used to pretend the baby's his, and it's it's quite abusive, and they're all in the one household, and he's not very nice, and there's all these other things going on at the same time.
Why the tears then, Laura? What do you think?
I'm not even talking about tears. I'm talking about ugly crying on a bus.
Why the ugly crying on a bus?
Because it's heartbreaking. Because it's written so well, and it's so, the women. It's a tragedy, but the women are so strong.
Yeah.
The resilience, like that's something. The resilience throughout all of this, through the physical and mental abuse that they all had to go through.
Are you willing them on?
And they're still there. You're still willing them on. And they all they're not perfect characters. Mariam isn't very nice to this girl, Layla. And I always try to, I feel there's a lot of backstory. My husband always makes fun of me because I love a backstory. I'm like, but why are they like that? The psychology.
No, but it's a great question.
I'm like, if someone does something bad, why did they do that?
Yeah.
And I feel like we have that because it spans over 40-something years. You have there's so much information there that Khaled has put in there.
Yeah.
I think understanding, even though I've never been to Afghanistan, but understanding what the landscape is around that makes a huge thing when Taliban invade, and there's different things that happen, particularly when women are outside of the house or seen to have had extramarital affairs and things like that. It's something that I can't comprehend, but as someone who watches the news, I can see it happens.
I remember feeling very sad watching the news after the Americans left Afghanistan. If you remember, they kind of left in a bit of a hurry, and the Taliban came in and said, "No, we're going to let things roll the way we were a little bit, give women a chance." And then I remember watching a news report, and it was girls outside of school, and they were bawling, crying because the teacher said, "I can't let you in," and they just wanted to go to school.
To learn. And
I remember thinking, I was on the radio that morning thinking, I think I said it aloud, going, if you are in the back of the car going to school today and you're worried or you're upset and you don't want to be there, listen to those girls. Because their opportunities are crushed by some mad religious regime that has decided that women are the devil's work.
Just because you're born a woman,
Crikey.
you don't have. And it's
2024.
I remember doing a trip with UNICEF a few years ago, and I met these gorgeous girls. And I sometimes I'm a little bit too positive for my own good. I annoy myself. Do you know, there's nothing you can't do, yay. And I kind of went into the situation like that. And boy, did I get a knocking down.
Did you?
Because I had this young girl who spoke so eloquently, so smart. She was about 12 or 13. And I said, what do you want to do when you're older? And she went, I'd love to be a doctor. And I went, you could do that.
Yeah.
She went, no, I can't.
Yeah, thanks for your encouragement.
It got me because she went, no, I can't. And I was like, oh shit, you can't.
That's
and
definitely.
actually just even now thinking about that, because I remember thinking, who the hell am I coming in here telling
that's
you can
the difficulty.
Anything? Yeah.
Imagine the girl crying outside the school and you rock up saying, you can go to school, you can do this. She goes, I physically can't.
I physically can't.
I'm not allowed. So
Yeah.
I appreciate your concern.
Yeah.
But you don't live in the world we live in. And thanks for noticing us, but you're not going to achieve anything. It's a bit bleak now, but...
But it's also when I was reading this book, I think, I was like, I could be that woman if I was just born there. What's the difference? I can't control where I'm lucky that I was born.
But you advocate for women's rights in your when you're not acting or presenting or whatever. Why do you do that?
Because I can.
Yeah.
Because I can.
And what do you want to hope to achieve? Or is it just an ongoing crusade, if you want to call it that?
it's not even, I just think it's obvious. Like, I don't think it's a big thing. I think if you have a voice in any way, and we're very lucky to have a voice, and we hope someone listens to it. And if they do in any way, my mom used to always say, like, if you have a platform, use it.
Good.
And like, I'm very lucky. I get to go to glamorous things and have a lovely time. And I interviewed these like fabulous people, and then I'm on stage, and it's great. And people clap and give you flowers. And I'm like, what am I actually doing? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you want to have a purpose.
You want to have a purpose, and that's maybe out of selfish reasons too, because I don't think I could survive if I was just doing that. You need to have something else that you're doing something.
Yeah,
you have
it's
to.
a bit fluffy and irrelevant.
Yeah. And I think as well, as you get older, particularly like with having a child, and you're probably the same. You're like, God, what world am I bringing children up in? Like, it's a little bit terrifying. It's very terrifying.
It is terrifying. And you have to lead from the front then as a parent as well, don't you? And try and hope that, hope that they look up and go, well, at least she or he
said something. Be on the right side of history in a way, say something and learn. And also, we're learning constantly, and we'll probably end up learning from the younger generations. I feel like my 3-year-old probably teaches me things all the time.
Yeah.
But it's, you can get things wrong, or you can kind of think one thing and then change your mind and constantly evolve. But I think you should constantly question everything. Always.
Well, I agree with that. And I think being the dad of 2 girls, and I'd love to know what Ian thinks about this, it makes you look at gender discussions differently.
Yeah.
Because you are the dad of 2 girls, and you don't want them, well, they're women now, of course. In your case, they're she's just a little dote. But you don't want them living in a world that's unfair to them because of the fact that they're female.
They're women. It's funny because I remember like me and Ian would have that discussion, even just about when my first job was on MTV, and I co-hosted with these 2 guys, Ricky and Melvin, who are just brilliant. I love. But like, I was always like, what I wore was talked about in a different way than what they wore.
Yeah.
Do you know? Or your body was talked about different than theirs was. And then little things. I remember during lockdown, when you could go out for 1 hour during the day, and I was like, oh, I need to go for a run before 4 o'clock because the sun was going down.
Yeah.
Because it was like coming into winter time, and Ian would go for a run at 9 o'clock, and he'd be like, oh, I hate that. You can't go for a run at night time.
Because you are?
Because you're a woman.
Cry.
Because someone might attack you, and then it's your fault. Do you know? Like, but like, I'm not saying that. Like, that's just a thing that's in your head.
No, I know. Yeah.
And I remember when I used to work in a pizzeria when I was younger, in Bray, and I lived 5-minute walk from the house, but my mother was like, "You are not walking home." Like, so I'd have to like pay half my tips on getting a taxi home when the guys, because I was like, I can't walk home because someone might attack me, and I need to get out of that situation, because that's, as a woman, that's what most of my friends think.
It's a different...
It's just a mindset. And I think Ian was like, I never really thought about that, but yeah.
That's the joy of not being a woman.
Yeah. And like, yes, it's scary for everyone out there, but I just sometimes feel a bit more targeted or more vulnerable, maybe because statistically women are more likely to be attacked.
You've mentioned a word that I want to ask you about. You've mentioned a few times, which is luck and lucky.
Yeah. I have a tattoo on my foot in Irish, an tá.
An tá.
Which means luck.
Why?
I think I'm very lucky in that, and it goes back to that book, 1,000 Splendid Suns. In the country, I love being Irish, and I love being Irish also outside of Ireland. There's very few, I think, there's very few people who can leave their country and be liked as much elsewhere. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, sometimes I big up the Irish even more when I'm away.
Yeah.
I studied in Boston for a semester, for 6 months in Boston University. And by God, they love us over there. Because they're all Irish, but I was actually Irish.
You were the real deal.
I was the real deal.
We'll go back to luck.
Yeah. So for me, I feel lucky that way. I also believe you can make your own luck. I remember when I got the MTV gig, I was so uncool at school. Like, I was such a nerd.
Were you?
Such a nerd. I think I had one boyfriend ever, and that, like, he came when I was 19. Like, I went to an all-girls school, sex education from the nuns. Like, do you know what I mean? You're not doing it.
No.
So it was like, I was just kind of like this little nerd who did like debating and stayed extra to do like drama, and like that's what I was doing. And then I entered this competition to be the face of MTV and won it. I went to London and was like interviewing all these like rock stars and being invited to these mad parties. And I remember someone at home being like, how the hell did you get that?
Because I'm asking the same question.
Yeah.
Because you've painted this picture of this sort of, I don't want to go out there. A little bit of jazz hands, but only a little touch. Little
jazz hands.
Marco Rubio jazz hands.
We love a bit of jazz hands.
And yet here comes MTV, and I'll say that's a massive leap for the imagination and for your head.
Yeah, but I remember when someone was like, how did you get that? And I went, oh, because I entered the competition. Did you? Because someone was like, oh, I would have loved that job. I'm like, it was an open competition.
Yeah.
I just entered it.
It's back to that thing. Anyone could do that. Yeah, but they didn't.
Yeah, but they didn't. But they also didn't enter it. Like you have to be in it to win it. It's like the lotto. Going, I never win the lotto. I'm like, but did you buy a ticket? Do you know? It's the same kind of concept.
But you obviously auditioned for MTV.
Yes.
And you were really good. And let's not be all Irish and say, I know I was only okay. You got the gig. Okay, so you were really good. Say thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And you know what I'm doing here.
Our head's too big now.
No. Again, that's okay. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But you were really good. You got the job. That's not lucky. That's talent. So where's the luck come into it?
I made my own look in that I gave myself. There was an opportunity there, and I kind of put myself in there.
That wasn't lucky. That was smart. That was diligent.
But there was other.
I'm having a problem with lucky here.
There was like 3,000 people entered that competition.
Yeah, you were the best. So go on.
But I also know
where's the luck in that?
There's 3,000 tapes, and you even know from like my husband was casting.
Why are you talking yourself out of the gig that you got?
I'm telling you, but like someone could have been in a bad mood looking at my tape. Do you know what I mean? Like someone looked at my tape.
Fair.
In the right mindset and went, put her through to the next level. You know, or someone could have missed my tape or the tape didn't work. And I put it in, I did what I could do, and then I left it open to the universe. Do you know?
Okay.
Like I put it open to the universe, and the universe was on my side that day.
Laura Whitmore, the book that changed your life. Have you read it?
This is really hard as well.
Have you read a few that have had that impact? Or,
yeah. And again, similar to A Thousand Splendid Suns, it was a timing thing. It's when you read something. Completely
agree, yeah.
This is a book by, it's called Love Warrior by Glennon Doyle. And it's a very American book.
Okay.
It's a memoir. And it's very honest.
I'm gonna it's a very American book. But what are we getting all Oprah now? Is that what you're saying?
It's one of Oprah's favourites.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay, what's it about?
And actually, my friend from LA gave it to me, Britt, when I was in LA.
Yeah. What is it? I'm not going to be dismissive because I don't know anything about it. So let's hear it.
So it's one of Glennon's, maybe it's her second book. And since then, she's written Untamed and all these other books, which are brilliant. But, you know, Americans are very good at... Because we're having this conversation and it's very hard to say that like I'm good at something because that's not how we're brought up.
No, it's not. No.
Well, and I remember being in LA at that time when I got that book, and I remember going in for a meeting, and my American manager at the time was like, "Laura, you need to start selling yourself more." And I think I'm good at selling myself, but obviously not as good as Americans are.
You see, if you sell yourself in Ireland, you've got notions. Now, this is trying to explain this to anyone listening from abroad going, what are they talking about? No, but in Ireland, we should say, there is a sort of an oppressive thing when it comes to ambition and talking yourself up. You talk yourself up, we will shoot you down. My friends have this thing where we're like, oh, far from that she was raised now. Jesus, far from that she was raised. And that's passing on to another generation. Okay. Well, Americans don't seem to have that. Okay, let's go back to your book. So I'm in LA. My friend has given me the book. I still have it, and she's written in it like she's very American and she's very into like self-help guru and like Pilates teacher. And I'm like, I'm in it. Like I'm in it 100%. And actually, it is a heartbreaking book too. It's a memoir. Glennon Doyle, who I wasn't familiar with her at the time. She had a big blog, like kind of like a mom blog. But then she talks about heartbreak. She talks about. She had an eating disorder, like infidelities within her marriage and all the stuff she was kind of going through. And it's very honest, like very honest. And I'm like, oh, people write like this. Okay. And it's, it's nonfiction. It's not like, escapism through characters. I'm like, oh, she's just telling us everything warts and all. And she doesn't come across well always in it. So why is this book impacting you so much? It changed your life. It's a big question. It's really hard because I think it was a time of my life. And I think I was just really interested reading this woman's journey who I didn't know. And then I, again, had tears for. I was like, and this is a real person. What age were you when you were reading this, do you think? Like in my 20s, later 20s. Yeah. So it was like I was doing telly stuff. What was happening in your life, roughly speaking? Can I ask you? Where was I? Or were you lost a bit? Or I was like overwhelmed. I think the roller coaster of like getting the MTV gig, and I just went with it. I never really thought about. I remember someone a year later in MTV said that was big. Like you moved to London, you didn't know anybody. It's like big, and I went, oh, Jesus, it was. But I was too busy doing it. To realise it was quite scary. You were caught up in the whole excitement of it all. So I think then you get to a stage, and I think I had got the I'm a Celebrity gig on ITV, which is a live show, working with Ant and Dec, who I grew up watching. Yeah. Do you know the irony? Do you know what I mean? You're just like, this is, and I'm working with them every day. Yeah. Like what the hell? How does that happen? Did you hit a point there where you went, whoa?
I was just like,
What the
everything
hell?
I wanted is happening, but I'm scared now because I'm doing it. Do you know, in a way?
Well, go on, explain that. You were scared
what-
of what, I wonder?
And what do I do? Well, what do I do next? And actually, at that time, I've always loved writing, but kind of more like features, like from a journalistic, like you'd write. I remember, you won't even remember this, but I interviewed you for the college paper, the
do
college
remember
view,
that.
and I think it was my dad knew Terry,
Terry Hand, my godfather.
your godfather.
Yeah, and you were like this young person.
I was at DCU and I
Yeah.
wrote for the college paper. We did a lovely interview.
Yeah.
So I loved interviewing people and I loved writing, but only ever these about other people.
Whatever happened to Laura Whitmore?
Whatever happened to her? Where did she go?
Like a young kid from the DCU
You ended up on the
paper.
front of College View, by the way.
Well, that's when I knew I'd arrived.
It was a great feat. But I always wrote about like other people,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
and never about myself.
Yes.
And I think reading her book probably helped me write my book, which isn't a memoir. I wrote a book that's quite self-help, but it was like, I don't know, probably a little bit more vulnerable than I would have been normally because I had, I guess, the safety of everything was about someone else.
Yeah.
Like I interviewed Katy Perry and it's about her. It's not about me.
No, I know exactly.
Do you know what I
you're
mean?
saying.
There's
It's
like a
very,
safety.
It's a very different. Even here today, it's a very. You're on the other side of the desk in a manner of speaking, and it's totally different to where if you were here. You know, we know how this works.
Do you like being interviewed?
No.
It's weird, isn't it?
A bit of me does a little bit, but then I kind of would walk away from it going, "What did I say?"
I'm like, what have I revealed?
Yeah,
or
what?
is it going to be twisted out of context? Or
I will say though, I mean, now in kind of 2024, halfway through, I probably wouldn't be as afraid now because I don't
You don't care.
as
Yeah.
much, about what people think,
Yeah,
which is
it's
quite
lovely.
nice.
It's-
It comes with age,
yeah.
probably more, but
they'll say what they want anyway.
so off
So
they go.
what's it's written like so many things.
I know
The
who
headline's
and-
written already.
Well, there is unfortunately a bit of that, but I know who and what's important.
Yeah,
And that's the key.
yeah.
Sometimes it takes a while to.
And then it's
figure that
nice
out.
to kind of there was a few things I'd written about that I just became a little bit more vulnerable with. But still had the control over. Like I'm still quite private with some things because I feel like I don't have full control over it and knowing what my boundaries are. But it's okay to be a little bit vulnerable. It's okay.
Have you been have people jumped up and down in a mean way about you at any point in your career?
Oh, all the time.
Is it
Constantly.
ongoing or is it because you're you wouldn't be working as much as you are without being excellent. I'm not plumossing, but
I'm nice to work with, I think.
no, you're a pleasure to talk to.
I work hard
This
and
is
I'll
the
turn
longest
up.
we've ever spoken. I'm
It
really
is.
enjoying
It's
your company.
lovely, isn't
It's
it?
really,
We just need to have a
really
pint
lovely.
next time.
Next time, I'm happy to do that. I'll see you in London.
Yeah.
But the score, like what I'm saying to you is that when they jump up and down and say, she is that, she looks like this, she is that. What do you do with that?
Do you know, so in Glennon's book, she talks about being a kid and being told that you can't have space in a room, like being small in a room, that she was kind of small and blonde and she
A little bit like yourself.
and she was like, if you're pretty, it's kind of warm and people like it, but as soon as you're smart or give any chat back, it's a bit cold. And it's that balance between what you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Do you know, I've had it before where I've been at things and I quite like socializing. I'm good at chatting to people. My husband hates it. He hates it. Considering he's a comedian, like he hates small talk at things. Well, I'll just talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are like, oh, I didn't expect all that to come out of you. Because I'm like, hey, how's it going? And they're just like, oh, especially in London.
What were they expecting?
I don't know, a bit like, I don't know, maybe not as loud or chatty or, I don't know.
Outgoing.
Maybe I'm a lot. I don't know.
No.
So it's that balance of people want you to be a particular way, but as soon as you say something that goes against it or goes against what you should be, maybe the notions that there's sometimes pushback.
So criticism, do you bring it home or do you leave it in the bin at the office or?
I used to I do have a bite. So if something pushes me, I will bite back. I remember when I was pregnant or maybe I just had a child and there's paps outside the house a lot. And I guess I didn't really know my rights, which you do have rights because no one can take a picture of your child. And it was just I think because it was lockdown as well, they had nothing else to be doing. And I felt very trapped in my house. And there was a photographer one day and I hadn't seen him and I was walking and I saw him and I just went.
Yeah.
And maybe it was like a maternal thing. Probably told him to move on in other words.
In colourful language.
Yeah.
You just reminded me running through Regent's Park in London and seeing the beautiful cygnets and goslings and you go to see them and you get closer and closer and the mother looks up and goes and looks at me and goes, I'm coming for you.
I'm coming for you. I'm going to get you.
But did motherhood change you dramatically or a little bit or not at all?
definitely think it does naturally. I think I'm still the same person. I think sometimes, and I was very, kind of trying to be quiet about my pregnancy as much as possible because I wanted to get my head around it. And also you don't know how the pregnancy is going to go. I think I remember as soon as I got pregnant, I got all these questions like, are you going to go back to work or what are you going to do? And I remember my husband got none of those questions. And it was like, oh, are you going to go back and do Love Island? Or are you like none? I got those questions. I'm like, there's two of us in this relationship. And I knew if he could, he'd be the one at home because he much prefers it.
Yeah.
So I just didn't like that. I'm the mom now. And I remember I got sent lovely, like I shouldn't, but like sent all these like mom devices and mom stuff and like got asked to do all these mom things. And I was just like, whoa. Like that's not just who I am now.
Yeah. And
motherhood for me, it's like the best thing I've ever done, without a doubt. It's just probably made me feistier and probably more ambitious.
Yeah. Why?
Because I can get so much more done in a day. I don't know what I used to do. The stuff I do before 9 a.m.
Because of the
drive, because there's so much to do. There's a schedule. And I just feel since I've had a child, like there's things that I can do in a day. It's just like Laura in her 20s was lazy.
I can't. You're a human whirlwind. You're on stage in the Olympia with your play. Congratulations, by the way, because that is not. I just don't know how you do that on top of anything. 222, a ghost story. And you're that's running there for a couple of months.
2 months.
Yeah, good. But let's you settle in Ireland for a little while, and you've shipped the whole family over, so you're getting a real taste of the place. I think that sounds really
lovely,
nice.
and it's a play. I did it in the West End, and I love the play so much. Like I love it. So when the opportunity came up to bring it to Ireland for quite a stint, it kind of was a no-brainer.
Yeah. And how are you on stage? You okay?
I played Jenny in London, and when they asked me about coming. That was like a year and a half ago when they asked me about bringing it to here. I said, can I play the other female? Because I wanted for myself, I wanted to challenge myself. And I initially auditioned for Lauren.
So here we are.
So I got to do it. And it's just a great play. Danny Robbins is the writer who's phenomenal. And the script he's written, it just makes it easy for us.
Congratulations. I'm going to get to see it and I look forward to it. And I'll tell you what I think about it, honestly, to your face.
Unless you hate it, don't say anything.
After 6 drinks. I have in front of me your May baby.
I am. May the 4th be with you.
May the 4th be with you.
You'll never forget it. No one ever forgets it once I say it that way. It's so stupid, but it works. I have so much Star Wars merchandise.
Have you actually? Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness.
I love Star Wars.
Original stuff?
Like I have quite a few actually. I love it.
Like what? Can you... I didn't know you were a Star Wars fan.
I love Star Wars, yeah. I did a big thing in Anaheim for Disney, like where I had to like go into Anaheim with all the proper fans. They did a lot of big things and like the original like R2D2 and all that stuff.
And you were into it?
Yeah, it's cool.
I didn't have you cut out for that.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh,
I love
respect.
it. Yeah.
So can I ask you what age you are? Do you care?
Yeah. I'm like 39.
39. Does 40 matter?
I hope it does.
Does it matter to you? Like, are you freaked out? Do you care?
I just think age is a privilege. I honestly think age is. I'm so lucky because I know people who haven't got to 40. So for me, I'm like, if I get to 40, I'm a very lucky person.
By that you mean, you've friends who've passed away.
Yeah, like who don't, and I just think age is such a privilege, and also I look at what I've done in the last 2 years, last 10 years. I'm wondering what I'm going to do in the next 10 years.
The ambition is still there.
The 30s was way more fun than 20s was a lot of fun. 30s was very different. But brilliant. I preferred the 30s. So the 40s I'm hoping are even better.
I hope so too. It just brings us to our last book, which is not a book that you've read or yet written. And it's you have written, I know that. But
what did I say?
But we have asked you for the name of the autobiography you have yet to write. And now on the cusp of your 40s, this is something you look back on hopefully in a few decades and go, gosh, what was I thinking? But or I was right. So what are you going to write? What are you going to call it? It
was so hard because I've written a book before and I spent so long about the titles with the publishers, like back and forth, but I wanted what they wanted. So the book that was out was No One Can Change Your Life Except For You, which is my favourite song lyric from a Wilson Phillips song. So I love that because for me, I'm like, I'm in charge of my own destiny. That's already taken. So I can't do that. So the thing that everyone shouts at me is, you're on off the telly. I have a production company called You're One. Like literally to this, and people just go, that's your one, that's your one, that's your one, that's your one off the telly.
That's your one.
And Ian's like, this is what they say. He always jokes. He's like, that's what they say to you. You're one.
It's going to be called, what are you going to call it?
You're One Off the Telly.
You're One Off the Telly. Spelling one as?
So, W-A-N. So it's Y-E-R. -WAN. It's the name of my production company. You're One.
You're One Off the Telly.
You're One Off the Telly.
Such a good name for it. What a great way to end our conversation today. Laura Whitmore, I really enjoyed talking to you today.
That was lovely.
Yeah,
Let's do more.
I'd love to. I just think it's great to talk to you in a meaningful sense and not just like passing by. Good luck with the drama.
Thank you.
222, a ghost story, happening in the 3 Olympia Theatre. And to you and Ian and your baby daughter. Well, she's not a baby now, she's toddling, isn't she?
I know, she's 20 now.
Good luck with that. Yeah, she's 20, she's 24.
They grow up so fast.
Yeah. Good to see you, Laura. Thanks so
Ryan.
much.
Thank you.
So here's this week's Ryan Recommends, brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. I'm going with Barbara Kingsolver and Demon Copperhead. A lot of you might have read it already. It's been out a little while, but it's sold millions of copies, and for good reason. This is a beautifully written book. It's set in the Appalachian Hills of Virginia and follows our main protagonist, Demon Copperhead, in which he navigates just poverty, drugs, difficult lifestyle, difficult family situation. It sounds grim, and you know what? It kind of is grim, but it's so well written. It's such a good insight into a side of life a lot of us are fortunate enough not to know, not to realise, and certainly not to want. This is this week's recommendation, and I hope you like it. And this book and all of the books we discuss on this episode of our podcast are available now in your local Eason store, or order them online from easons.com before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch with free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired.